going to do recommendations for the Department of Labor, Dental Board, and Board of Examiners in Optometry. So we're going to start off with the Office of the Governor. And so, Dylan, if you could give us an overview of that budget.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Dylan Deere. I'm the Assistant Director for Fiscal Affairs for the Legislative Research Department, and I will be covering the Office of the Governor. We also have Will Lawrence here from the Office of the Governor, as well as representatives of the Governor's Grants Office and the Division of Budget. You should have a budget analysis before you here on the Office of the Governor. All right, I'm going to turn immediately to page 4 of that budget. So you have an expenditures and financing table, which you'll see in any other sort of budgets. You can see that the state general fund expenditures going from 16 up through 2022 sort of trended around just below $10 million for those years. And then it's increased dramatically starting in that fiscal year 2023. And then sort of is staying right around that, almost $30 million range for fiscal year 24 and 25. In FY23, the legislature approved an additional $20 million in one-time spending for the Rural Housing Revolving Loan Program that goes through the Office of the Governor. Also starting in 24, the legislature began funding the CASA program, that's court-appointed special advocates, predominantly from the SGF, and eliminated some special revenue funding inside of the judicial branch, which is driving some of those changes. And for those out years, I'll sort of talk about those SGF effects in FY24 and FY25 in a little more detail. Turning to the next page on page 5. The legislature originally approved $49.2 million, including $22.9 million from the state general fund. There was a reappropriation of $596,000 of state general fund. Okay, for the agency revised supplemental request, it's $26,212. That is the pay plan shortfall amount, which you have seen in many other agency budgets. And then you have a series of various other adjustments, the majority of which are from federal funds. So you have ARPA funding. Those are the LSSE grants, which can be used to support law enforcement. A lot of it is related to sort of wildland fire suppression, replacement of equipment. You have ICGAR grants. You have violence against women grants, forensic science improvement grants, crimes victims assistance grants. And I won't ask you to turn the page now, but I will give you a little bit of a heads up. On page 17 of the budget analysis before you, if you're sort of curious about what those various grants are for, each grant has a little bit of a blurb, sort of describes what that grant is for, what it's intended to accomplish. The one that really sort of stands out is that item number 3. That's that ARPA funding grant, because that's more discretionary with the state. So the agency submitted a revised budget of $57.3 million, including $23.5 million SGF and 63.3 FTE positions. There is a half an FTE associated with the LSSE program. It's an increase of $7.5 million from all funds, or 15%, including a decrease of $60,000 SGF, or 0.3%, below the approved amount. And once again, the agency's revised estimate includes an increase of $3.4 million from the federal ARPA funds. For fiscal year 2024, the governor concurred with the agency request. With that, it would stand for questions on 24. Some more meat and potatoes portions of this budget are really in 25.
Committee, any questions on 24? Representative Riley.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a real quick question on page 5 there. There's the, I think it's the number 9, Justice Assistance Grants and the Forensic Science Improvement Grants. First of all, the Forensic Science, is that something that should be related to anything that the KBI is doing? Or why is that coming under here?
Sure. So I'll go ahead and turn to page 17 of the budget you have before you.
see it right off. Am I missing it?
All right. Justice assistance grants are on page 18, top right-hand column. And so you see the purpose of the Burn Formula Grant Program is to assist state and local governments and tribes and nonprofit organizations in a broad range of activities. There's a formula that drives that funding access. It has 9 purposes: law enforcement, prosecution, crime prevention, education, corrections, community corrections, drug treatment enforcement, planning. These are all monies that are sort of distributed. It is possible to request a JAG table, which is approved, so you can see where each one, for what purpose each one of these JAG dollars goes out for. And for the National Forensic Sciences Improvement, that's on page 19, top left-hand column. So the Paul Coverdale Forensic Sciences Improvement Grants awards grants to states and local units to improve the quality and timeliness of forensic science and medical examiner services. And it can be used to eliminate a backlog of analysis of forensic evidence, to train and employ forensic laboratory personnel as needed, and that state administrating agencies may apply for both the formula, and there's also competitive grants as well that are part of that forensic sciences improvement grant. So you're correct. I mean, a lot of this goes to KBI. I think it can go to locals too. So once again, this is something that if you'd like, we can go ahead and pull together like a record of how those monies have gone out in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I don't think so. So basically, those are just unique grants that are falling under these other categories. Is that what you're saying? That's why there wasn't really broke out as such?
That's exactly right. And what I'm really tracking there, the reason I'm identifying those is because there's been some kind of change from the approved. So that's really what you're talking about here, is it's gone up or it's gone down, something's happened. And I don't really talk about all the ones that don't change that much.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, go on to 25.
So on the 25 analysis, the agency is requesting $50.7 million, including $23.1 million SGF. The request is a decrease of $6.6 million, or an 11.5% below the 24 revised estimate. The SGF decrease is primarily attributable to the lack of reappropriations. So basically, back out the reappropriated dollars. There's a reduction of $5.3 million in crime victims assistance grants, which I'm sure you will hear from conferees about quite a bit later. There's also ARPA fund spending going down as well, and the criminal justice grants are decreasing. It leaves you with all other adjustments totaling $261,914 all funds, or $264,000 SGF. In that, there's the majority of the increases in the administration program, with $163,000 or $162,000 allocated for salary and wage adjustments. And that increase is due to the elimination of $153,000 in salaries and wages shrinkage. And the remaining increase is related to budgeted reappropriations as part of that. Looking at the governor's recommendation on page 10, the governor concurred with the overall budget, but added $5.9 million SGF for domestic violence prevention grants due to a federal funding shortfall. Added $1.1 million SGF for Child Advocacy Center grants due to a federal funding shortfall, and added $634,000 for CASA grants. As a result, her recommendation is an increase of $7.6 million, or 32.8% above the agency request. In the back of the, moving backwards through it, you can see a little bit more detail on the supplementals and enhancements. The Office of Recovery budget, the Office of the Lieutenant Governor is in here, the Office of the Recovery budget. The primary responsibilities of the Office of Recovery budget is simply sort of monitoring those ongoing ARPA fund spending, verifying federal compliance. And then, of course, the Federal Grants Office is detailed here. And on page 21, you have the Commissions on Disability and Minority Affairs, which includes the Kansas Hispanic and Latino American Affairs Commission, is part of this, and the remainder of the Disability Affairs Commission and the African American Affairs Commission are part of this group of expenditures as well, and part of this subprogram. With that, I would stand for questions on the budget for the Office of the Governor.
Dylan, on page 9, so the $5.3 million, almost 700,000 and 228,000. Do those correspond fairly well to the 6, 7, and 8 that she added?
So, I mean, it's not a direct correlation because, frankly, there's not a direct correlation between crime victims assistance federal grants, okay, and the domestic violence prevention and child advocacy center grants. Those monies are often used to draw down that portion of the federal funding by like local grantees, but it's not like a 1-to-1 correlation, which you'll often see, or 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 correlation, which you'll often see in the rest of state government, where we put in this number of state dollars and we get back X number of federal dollars. It's more of a, there's more flexibility in these. It's more of the reduction of $5.3 million, according to the Office of the Governor and identified inside of her GBR, was to identify that those VOCA dollars are going down. There is some data that's out there. I mean, crime victims assistance funds, the total balance in the federal government has gone down dramatically because starting in federal fiscal year 2015, there was some caps that were removed on the ability to distribute those funds and dollars. And now, as those caps have gone away and the total amount of funding has gone up to those balances drew down. And so we're really looking at the effects of drawing those down. There's a lot of additional detail I could share as you wish. I mean, there was a VOCA fix that allowed some new federal funds to flow into that, but that really hasn't realized the receipts yet to be able to close that gap. But this is definitely, according to the governor and identified in the GBR, she stated that this was to identify this federal funding shortfall and make up for that difference.
Yeah, that's what I thought, and I was just trying to. I'll ask Will this other Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you asked the majority of my question, but let me just re-hit this and dumb this down for me, my friend. I need to understand it. I don't want to make a decision out of lack of context. So this federal funds, when we first started utilizing them, it was a scenario where it was a 1-for-1 or a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1. We put some in, they put some in, and now the feds are reducing that, and the governor wants to perpetuate it at the state's expense.
Okay, so I could talk a little bit about that. Now, there is a match requirement that's built into VOCA funds. It's like 20%. Okay, it can be cash or in kind. Okay, but this is not where it's like the state is going out there and drawing down the VOCA funds directly, although they do flow through the state. It's more of us providing funds to local grantees and then grantees drawing down those funds. Okay, and these federal dollars aren't like like regular federal funds from ICGR or some of these other grants where it's just coming out of the federal budget. These are coming from a specific source, okay? And that source would be judgments, basically, that are coming when people pay into that fund because they've committed a crime. And that's where that was. And it had gotten as high as like over $13 billion. It was like sitting out there. And so then these funds started to flow out to the states. Once had this funds balance is getting too high, they're going to start flowing out. And now the amount of dollars is going out. The statements from the federal government are somewhere in the range of 40% in reduction in the total amount of funds that are flowing out because these fund balances have been driven down. As far as can I tell you 100% that the governor said, well, these are lower, therefore, I'm increasing the amount of state funding. I can only say that she said there was a federal funding shortfall, and in response, I'm increasing state funding. And I can show you a little bit of back historical detail if you want on what we have historically given for domestic violence prevention and child advocacy centers. I have a table on that if you'd like to see it.
I would love to see that. That'd be great. Now, remember, every time I'm asking a question from not only this committee's perspective, but the following one for which we'll hear and see it tomorrow, right, or the next day, or whenever we retouch this in appropriations. Not that I'm saying there isn't a need for this funding, but it isn't always about whether or not it's a need, but is it coming from the right source? So does the agency, I mean, obviously these agencies that benefit from this, these entities that benefit from this funding will still need the money, but is this the appropriate source is my question. So if if we change this, I guess, algorithm, if we do not approve of the MAP, the state backfill, the agencies can still draw down that money with this stream. Can the agency still re-ask for these appropriations wherever they have it going now?
So I think that what I have been informed, and you know, at some point I'll have to turn this over to the advocates and to the office of the governor to answer some of these questions, is that it's not so much the ability to match, okay, and draw down the funds, is that the federal funds themselves are beginning to be eliminated. So the question is, what level of service? It's a level, more of a level of service question. That, and then how, as far as what is the appropriate revenue source to provide that? Well, I couldn't answer that. I mean, that's very much a political question.
So, Dylan, do you have this with you? Don't you?
I do.
Can you have enough copies for everybody?
I do.
Okay. Let's hand that out and maybe go over that a little bit, if that's okay. If you could kind of explain it a little bit so everybody can understand it. And I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on this because we have a lot of testimonies. So this is more for everybody to kind of digest. But if, Dylan, if you kind of explain it so then they can digest it.
Yes, sir. So in order to fit it on one page, I did two sets of rows. So you can see I start back in fiscal year 2011. And this is state general funds for child advocacy centers grants, which is one of the grants you're seeing there. And you can see it's at this 900,000 and 17, 18, 19, it's dropping down to the $700,000 level. Then increase it, and it stays at that $700,000, $800,000 level up through fiscal year 2023, where it increases to $3.3 million and then $4.3 million as part of the governor's recommendation. The increase you're looking at in 23 and in part of the increase that you're seeing in 24 is related to the fact that there used to be problem gambling and addictions grant fund. So that you were seeing that PGAGF, that was a special revenue fund that would flow out for this purpose. And so it used to be about $150,000. Sometimes they increased it. You see in 16, 17, 18, they increased it a little bit. But the decision was made to rededicate those dollars back to problem gambling and then fund this from the state general fund. And then you see SGF for domestic violence prevention grants. It's that $3.7 million, 3.8, 3.8, 3.6, 4.3. And then it gets in starting in 19, it's trending closer to $5 million, 4.6, 4.7, 4.2, 4.8. And the variation you're seeing year to year is because these are actuals. Okay. So the legislature may have appropriated the exact same amount every single year, but what actually went out the door can vary. And then in FY 2014, you see it jumps to 15.6. And then in the governor's recommendation, 21.1. All right. And you can see federal crime victims assistance. Once again, just like we were talking about when they increase these funds, you see it sits at 3s, increases in 17, jumping up to 11, 18 up to 13, all the way up to like 22. You're up to about $21 million. And now cutting in half in the projections for 24 down to about $10.9 million. And those numbers are simply what was submitted as part of the governor's recommendation and certified by the Federal Grants Office, but do reflect guidance I've seen from the federal government on this point.
So the federal crime victim assistance grants, that's the ones that are going down.
That's correct.
Okay. So that's that last line. And so that, and then the rest of them are SGF. Above that shows the difference. And then the total is SGF and plus the federal grants.
Right. And so the grand total is all the funds, and it's a little ratio of state general funds to federal funds. So you can see back in 2011, state funding was exceeding the amount of federal funding. Now in 18, it's getting lower and lower as the amount of federal funding goes up. So you're getting down to the 27% range. Okay. And then the amount of state funding to federal funding increases dramatically up to the 24 GovRec of 232.6%. But the whole point here is this is not like a federal fund where there's a clearly driven formula grant. We put in $5 million of state funds, we get out $10 million worth of federal funds. That's not there's not a direct correlation in that way.
Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dylan, is that a typo in the second paragraph, last column, FY 2024, and then there's FY 2024 again? Is that last?
That's totally a typo. Yes, sir. I'll fix it.
All right.
That should be 25. I just pulled across and forgot to update it.
And follow. This is exactly what I needed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Dylan? Yeah, Representative Robinson.
My question is more where you, with the governor's budget, with the great presentations on the special classes of underserved, is just out of my ignorance of not knowing, there doesn't seem to be a single word about veterans who certainly have many needs that don't go through the approval of all the giganticness of the VA. I just don't know if that's coming up in another department or whatever.
Yeah, it would be in a different department. These are just the governor handles a lot of different grants that come through, and these are those grants. Yeah, Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that's a good question, and that kind of comes around to my original statement earlier. Is this the right place for these? You know what I mean? I mean, these all have agencies that advocate for these causes. So that's a good question. It's my fundamental premise in my original question. I appreciate that.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to the representative's point, I think that truly this is probably the best place for these funds to be. And I think one of the things that Dylan said a little bit ago, correct me if I didn't hear this right, is the flexibility that we have. There's flexibility in the monies with the SGF monies, being able to use that. So I think that this is truly the correct place for them to be because we can manage those.
Certainly, SGF monies are the most flexible funds in the state. As far as it's very much at the choice of the legislature how to appropriate and use those funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, not seeing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dylan. Appreciate it. All right, we are going to go ahead and start. We've got quite a few people that want to speak, and I lost my. There it is. All right, so we're going to start with Michelle McCormick. She's the director of Kansas Coalitions Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. So, welcome, Michelle.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I am Michelle McCormick. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. And we are a statewide nonprofit, and I'm the membership association for the 25 programs across the state who provide the direct services to domestic and sexual violence victims in Kansas. And so thank you for the opportunity today. You have my written testimony, so I'm not going to read from that. And also the written testimony goes into a great deal of detail for you, so I'm just going to hit the highlights. But I want to say I don't feel like I have to tell this committee, given your support last year, how critical the services are that our agencies provide. You know, we're describing emergency shelter, 24-hour hotline services, counseling. Our advocates go to the hospitals and they provide support to victims of sexual assault while they're getting a forensic exam. The services are critical, and I'll leave it at that. But we are back. We're back again this year requesting your assistance because unfortunately, the federal investment in our services are going down and at a time when the demand for our services are going up. And so that is pretty important for us that you understand that we are, of course, requesting the assistance to fill the Victims of Crime Act, the hole that's being left by the reduction in those VOCA funds. That is definitely a critical part of our ask and what we're supporting. But also, we are asking for additional funding on top of that. Last year, we were incredibly grateful that the legislature supported our programs because we were able to demonstrate to you that had our programs, if they were able to budget in a way that was forecasting the unmet needs for service, and so not budgeting based on the amount of money that we get, but the amount of money we need to actually serve the Kansans who ask for our help, that we needed well over $12 million in addition to the base funding amount and in addition to the hole that was created by the VOCA funds reduction. What we asked for last year was an additional $10 million, and you graciously gave us $5 million. And so I want to be clear, that amount of funding, which on the chart that Dylan provided looks like a big jump, it was the base amount of state general funds. It was $4.5 million to fill the VOCA hole last year. And then you gave us $5 million in addition to that to help us address those unmet needs of service. And so that's how the funding was used last year. But of course, we're back because the VOCA reduction is even more severe this year. And also, we still have a significant amount of unmet needs. Our programs are reporting that in last fiscal year, we had 3,000 Kansans who were not able to be served in the way they were requesting by our programs because our programs were at capacity, meaning the shelter was full and they couldn't get in. And specifically, I can give you some specific examples. In Wichita, for example, one of our shelter programs did private fundraising. They did a capital campaign, and they were able to successfully expand their shelter program by 60%. And to this day, they continue to be full and have to turn people away still. They grew their shelter capacity by 60% and still sit at full, right? If we don't get the assistance, we have many programs who report to us they'd have to reduce their services, they'd have to let staff go, and they'd have to reduce their services. And so in Pittsburgh, for example, our shelter program down there reports that the VOCA funded staff currently, they provide over 55% of the services that their agency provides. And so they reduce those services pretty significantly. Our Hutchinson program reported to me they'd have to close one of their rural outreach offices, that 3 of their 7 victim advocates are funded this way, and that equals 300 victims who would go unserved if not supported. And so I give you those examples because I don't think it's an overstatement to say that the services our agencies provide are life-saving. And so we're asking for your support again because of the critical nature of those services. And I'll tell you, our services, our programs work very hard, much like any good business, to diversify their funding. So they are getting a mix of federal grants, they're getting a mix of state grants, local community grants, and also private fundraising, so that it's a shared investment. And as was described, unfortunately, because of the problems at the federal level, we're seeing that investment go down. And I can promise you, we are doing just as much advocacy at the federal level, asking them to fix this problem that was created and to address that. But it's not going to catch up in time before it would have significant impact on our programs. And so we're asking for your help again. And so I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Michelle. Help me understand, because I do remember last year, and I'm looking at the chart. Now, maybe we're talking about 2 different things, but this committee put 5 million more in. But then I believe during the process of with the Senate, we put another 5 million in. So I believe it was a total of 10 million that we put in last year.
Yeah, and like 4.9 of that, about half of that was the amount that we were being reduced by VOCA. And so half of it was to keep us at level funding, given the reduction in VOCA. And then that 5 million, we think of it as sort of the innovation dollars or to help us meet those unmet needs.
Okay. I just want to make sure that, it was 10 million.
Yes,
So
yes, absolutely.
So everybody understands okay, thank you. Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a couple quick questions. It says you have 25 different places around the state. So we have I don't know whether it's under you or not, but we have a sexual abuse office there in Sumner County and Cali County. So is that under your funding?
It is that agent, that's actually a combination. Two agencies go together to serve Sumner County. Their home base is out of Wichita. The Wichita Area Sexual Assault Center and the Wichita Family Crisis Center have come together to create an outreach office there in Sumner County.
So that outreach office in Sumner County, that's an outreach. That's not.
Sir. Mm-hmm.
So I think you kind of answered that question. So then the funding for that, these other offices, so do you get any money from the county? Do you get any money from United Way? What other sources could help support you?
My agency does not, by the way. We're the state association, but those agencies get a mix of funding. And I can't speak to the percentage that the Wichita Family Crisis Center, for example, gets from I know that last week in the Senate hearing, the director of that program testified that she doesn't get any city or county funding. And so she reported that, but that she does get a little bit of assistance from her local United Way. But it would be really dependent on each agency, who they're all independent nonprofits, and so they're doing their own fundraising, and so it would be different for each of the agencies.
So that'd be Sedgwick County commissioners are not helping fund that?
That's what she reported. Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks.
Michelle, just so we understand the funding here, on page, I think it's your second page, you have second paragraph. You're asking for 5 million more SGF funds, as well as support the governor's budget enhancement of 3.7 million. I'm seeing 5.9 million from the governor. Yeah, the 5.9 million amount, if I get it correctly, and I'll also defer to some of the governor's staff in case I don't, but that includes 2,255,000 that is set aside for what is referred to as other subgrantees. And those other subgrantees are also some of the folks in the room, like we've got folks from Kansas Legal Services, the Disability Rights Center. They receive VOCA funding as well, but they're just not a domestic violence sexual assault agency. So they are allies and colleagues of ours, and we support them getting funding as well. But I believe that they were put under those domestic violence grants because it's all run from the governor's grants office, and they don't get a direct SGF allocation like we do. Okay, good enough. That explains it. Thank you. Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So maybe this is getting into the weeds too much, but I think we've got an ask later on that about the a grant, the federal government grant for VINE. It's the victims information.
The automated victim notification system.
And so that seems very related to your cause of what you're doing, because it is the victims that need to know this. So I guess my side question is your association very muchly promoting your folks to sign up for that system so that, 100% of the people know when somebody's coming out of jail that there's a problem?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Also, I'm uniquely situated. I used to be the director of victim services at the Attorney General's office where we administered that program. So I'm very familiar with it. And you'll have actually my written testimony in support of the VINE funding request as well. It is a service used by victims in Kansas and a service that we support because it allows many victims of crime sort of that autonomy. If a victim's experiencing trauma and it's 2:00 in the morning and they wake up and they just need to check to see and make sure their abuser is still in jail, it allows them that opportunity to do so, right? Which gives them peace of mind and agency over their safety in many ways. And so we are in support of that. It's separate from this request, of course. But yeah, you'll have my written testimony in support for that as well.
Yeah, I believe it's in the Attorney General's.
Yeah, correct.
Any other questions for Michelle? All right. Thank you for explaining.
Thank you so much.
Numbers. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Next, we have Heidi Wooten. She's the president and CEO of Safe House. Safe Home, sorry.
See now. Okay. Hi, Chairman Hoffman. Thank you for having me here. I'm back. I was here last year. I am actually a Western Kansas girl, born and raised in Pratt, Kansas, so I definitely understand the rural domestic violence needs as well as Johnson County. So Safe Home is the largest domestic violence agency in Johnson County. On any given day in our shelter, there are always more children living in our shelter than there are adults. Right now, we have 22 children living in our shelter. Because the demand and increase in domestic violence has hit us so hard, we currently have 44 families living in hotels. And that throughout the year is a lot to manage. But what that means when we're full is that there are people out there whose lives are in imminent danger, and the likelihood of them being killed is extremely high. And I say that now because in 2018, when I worked in the agency, we had all kinds of domestic violence victims and survivors who were experience different levels. Currently, after the pandemic of COVID, there is a pandemic of domestic violence, and it is at the highest level any of us have ever seen in our lives. The instances of non-fatal strangulation is up 110%. Strangulation in Johnson County and everywhere else means that's one of the top 4 indicators of the likelihood of you being killed. So there is the need in the sense that lives are at risk. We are currently representing 2 survivors in 2 attempted murder cases in Johnson County. So when we are asking for this funding, I know it sounds like a lot of money, and we are grateful, beyond grateful, for the $5 million that we received through the cuts we would have gotten from VOCA. This year, it won't be enough. We will, even with the level funding, our agency will have to experience cuts because level funding really is cuts. If you think about inflation, you think about healthcare costs. Our healthcare costs have gone up, 18%. Our IT costs are $75,000 a year, and they used to be 10. But with dual being able to protect our clients' information and people being hacked and the way that our world is working now, it's extremely costly for our IT. When the pandemic hit, we didn't even have computers that had videos on them, cameras, so that we could do virtual services. So we've had to pivot, and we've learned to survive. We are survivors. We live in the trenches. We are strong, and we can make this happen. The thing that keeps me up at night and the thing that I worry most about, and I know all the other DV agencies do as well, is we carry the burden of the safety of our Kansans, and it is critical. So I want to share that with you, and I want you to understand the level of trauma that it's impacted in the children. And this will, if we don't get these children and do the work that we can do with them now, then it's a generational cycle.
Any question? Yeah, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. As being a legislator from Johnson County, I appreciate the work that you do in our community. I don't know if you say this in your testimony, but does Johnson County give any type of funding?
No, we don't have any county or city funding. The police departments, of course, respond to domestic violence calls. We actually get calls from police departments when there's high lethality situations and they're fearful someone will die. We had 440 calls from police departments in emergency rooms last year. I think it might be helpful for you to understand that our operating budget is $5 million. We have 52 employees. We bought an old hotel and converted it into a shelter. We have to raise millions of dollars just to keep all those things. I'm raising money for my salary, our CFO's salary. You can't run a business without a CFO. You can't get federal grants without grant writers and all the data. It's expensive in addition to the match funding that we have to come up with, and you have to provide your employees with healthcare benefits and all those kinds of things. And you could go and work at Target and not have nearly as much trauma and stress in your life than working at Safe Home and taking 24-hour hotline calls where people, are in desperate need. So I don't know if that helps you or not. So a cut from this is just another cut to the agency in multiple levels is what I'm kind of trying to raise. So it's not that we're not fundraising. It's not that we're out there adding funds to the funds that we get. Our United Way funds, for example, were $100,000 a year. And then 2 years ago, the United Way has also been receiving cuts in financial support. So their cut went from 100,000 to 50,000. So everywhere you're turning to get your fundraising, no one's giving you more, everyone's giving you less. And so you kind of feel like you're drowning and you're just barely keeping your head above water most of the time.
That was my question. I just wanted to see the funding makeup, especially from a state, city, and county level in Johnson County. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Heidi, you said your budget is about 5 million. So of the
Yes,
5 million that if we were to give more, what would be your part?
So we already raise about 40% outside of our federal grants and local grants outside of that. So 40% is what we contribute outside of that. And we too did a capital campaign where we raised money to, do all those kinds of things as well.
Right. I think you misunderstood my question. If we were to give 5 million more to the fund,
right,
how much of that would Safe Homes get?
Oh, I think we would end up getting $1,000,001, $1,000,001. And that would be level funding for us for the past 2 years, which, like Harvesters, for example, our food, even Harvesters has had to increase their prices for food. It's everywhere. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Representative Robinson.
I'm not sure if I just didn't see it, didn't read it, but how much is allocated for professional counseling?
So we currently,
Parent that's going through. So, I didn't hear you say that, and I don't see it on here, and I just don't know.
Yeah, so we have 6 therapists who see our clients. And they served over 500 families last year in a year. And then if we were to get a cut, that would cut probably 1,000 survivors, but it would definitely cut people's therapy, their ability to live in our shelter, their ability to get legal services. We're one of the only agencies in Kansas that actually has an attorney on staff, and she's funded through a totally different, it's not a federal funding, but she's able to provide protection orders, divorces, represent you in court, and all those things. You can only imagine how much it would cost if you had to represent yourself.
All right. Any other questions? Don't see any yet. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you so very much. I really appreciate your help.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
Okay. Next we have ks.gov. I probably didn't say that right. Sorry. Executive Director of Children's Advocacy Centers of Kansas.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Casey Dalkey. I am Executive Director for Children's Advocacy Centers of Kansas. We are the state chapter organization that provides membership support, technical assistance, mentorship, and statewide leadership for all of our children's advocacy centers across the state. Currently, we have 17 CACs, as we call them, with an additional 12 satellite locations and 6 mobile units that are pretty unique to our state. Those mobile units are able to go out and meet the children and families where they are at in our rural parts of the state. Our CACs operate off of a multidisciplinary team, or MDT, approach that's set forth per statute. Our core MDT is our law enforcement, DCF, medical providers, mental health, prosecution, and of course, our CAC staff, advocates, and forensic interviewers. That MDT approach brings all of the professionals that need to work with children and families during a child abuse investigation to the table for them. In 2023, we provided 8,546 services to 4,400 children across the state of Kansas. I've got a stat sheet attached to my written testimony that gives you a breakdown of those types of services that we provided. advocacy, forensic interviewing, mental health therapy services, medical exams are all on that stat sheet for you to see. Last year, our centers received that 40% cut in VOCA funding, those federal dollars. And thankfully, with the support of the state, we were able to float our centers through. We're very grateful for the assistance that we received from the state last year so that we could keep our doors open. And yet, I'm here again today to describe and explain to you, we're looking at an additional 45% cut in VOCA funding this year. Much like last year, this is a detrimental a cut for our organizations. What this is going to result in is closure of entire organizations. Certainly our satellite office locations would need to close in service areas, as well as our direct service frontline workers are funded primarily through those VOCA dollars, loss in many of those staff members. Our frontline workers are our advocates, our interviewers, our mental health professionals, and that's what we're facing. On my stat sheet there, I've also got what it would look like, what our services would look like if we were to receive that 45% cut. So I took the numbers from last year, less those by 45%, so you could see that. Additionally, we are working on a national level with our partners at National Children's Alliance to advocate on the federal level to those providers, to Congress, to let them know the impact of what this cut is going to do to our organizations and educate them on the importance of our service as well. We have state level leaders in victim service programs like myself and the others that are here today in all 50 states, also advocating on that national level, that federal level, an attempt to educate them on the importance of these funds. And truly, when we're talking about the importance of our work at children's advocacy centers, we serve kids that have experienced sexual, physical, emotional abuse and neglect, have been witness to violence, witness to murder, witness to domestic violence, drug endangerment, and child sex trafficking. Those are the cases that we see. The importance of our work is critical. Additionally, through our multidisciplinary team approach, the CAC model works because of the partnerships that we form with not only our core MDT that I listed previously. Some centers use additional partnerships in their multidisciplinary team response to work the cases effectively, to help those outcomes through the judicial process. So to help create a stronger law enforcement investigation and hopefully create safer communities through increase in prosecution. I like to mention as well the importance of our work comes through research that I have in page 4 of my testimony, where you'll be able to read the detail on the lifelong impact of child abuse. This research cites that individuals that have one or more ACEs scores, ACEs being adverse childhood experience, are at higher risk for lifelong impact illnesses such as obesity, diabetes, PTSD, substance use, depression, increased chance of heart disease, cancers, and increased suicide attempts. And as if that weren't bad enough, those lifelong impacts also have an economic impact. The research states approximately $210,012 per individual as a cost to the economy for receiving those services due to those lifelong impacts. And I'm not here to say that CACs can completely fix that problem. But what I am here to say is that early intervention is critical. The services that we provide up front when children come out with their abuse disclosure is crucial. The services that domestic and sexual violence programs provide initially are crucial. Those life-saving measures and referrals to other victim service programs are indeed important to make sure that individuals know that there's help and support out there. I'm going to wrap up my testimony with a snapshot into the past. CACs began seeking a line item on the SGF budget in 2007. That came to fruition in 2008 with $1 million I was not around in these rooms at that time giving conversation as we are today, but it was my understanding that with that addition, the funds had an opportunity to grow, or the plans were that funding could grow to support the work of more CAC development as well as the increase of services. It's also my understanding the very next year those funds were cut, where they remained static-ish up until 2023, where the state was able to assist us in filling those vocal voids. And so with that, in 2008, when we were added to this line item of SGF, our centers were serving 1,753 children. Present day, as I'd said, we're at 4,400 children. That's a 151% increase. Our services are highly needed and a crucial part of healing Kansans for our future. I respectfully ask that you agree and accept with the governor's recommended $1.1 million increase. But I would also ask that you strongly consider an additional $2 million for child advocacy centers for a total of $3.1 million in 2025 SGF line item. This increase of funding, and as you've heard from prior individuals testifying, what we know is that static funding for our organizations is a decrease due to the referrals and the services that we are being requested to provide. As you have heard, and I'm not going to go back through, costs of everything are on the rise as well. And we need to get to a place where we can serve all of the children that need to be seen. There's 31% of the state of Kansas that's left unserved equitably by a child advocacy center or having access to a child advocacy center. With that additional funding, we'll be able to expand services, create more satellite locations. We currently have communities that have community members, MDT partners, ready to start a child advocacy center, but lack the funding to do so. Additionally, for the centers that are currently working with kids, therapy is, Kansas is in a mental health crisis. We have a need for therapy services that is having a hard time being met, specifically for our kids and families. Not every child advocacy center that we have in Kansas has the ability to provide on-site therapy services. It's crucial for our kids and families that experience secondary trauma after learning that their child has been sexually abused. When we're talking about therapy services for kids that have experienced abuse, there's specific modalities. Trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy is an important modality for them to use. It's not just any therapy service that will do. Some of you on this committee may have heard of PSB, or problematic sexualized behavior. That there's actually there's Kansas statute that requires Department for Children and Families to refer children that meet a specific criteria to a PSB, problematic sexualized behavior treatment program. Currently, there's only one in the state of Kansas in Wichita. And as you could imagine, they are overloaded with referrals from all over the state to try to get kids in to see them and be serviced. There's therapy providers sprinkled across the state that have a PSB component to their services, but an actual program, there's only one. And as you could imagine, the children that we see and that we serve through our centers, many of them desperately need that. So with that, I want to thank you for listening to me talk today and for your future support. And I'm going to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know the state doesn't have enough of them, but school counselors, how important are they to you guys on what you do? And it seems like, they see them a lot, maybe every day. So
Yes.
I just wondered what your thoughts are on that. Thank you.
Great question, Representative. Thank you for asking. Our core MDT that I talked about with the six, the law enforcement, DCF, mental health, medical, and CAC staff and prosecution, many of our communities, our CACs, have other organizations come in. Some of those include educators, not necessarily the teachers, but the counselors, the family support workers, superintendents. It just kind of depends on the size of the school, who that best supported person in. we bring them in so that we can have that multidisciplinary approach to helping kids thrive. And so there is a connection in many communities with CAC work and education system.
Any other questions? Representative Riley.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, was it 4,400 kids that you worked with this last year?
Yes.
So are you working with them for the whole year, or is there, an entry time and an exit time? And what is that entry exit average kind of thing? Is it more than a year, 90 days? How long is it that you're working with kids?
Great question. Thank you. Many of them are, so our services are voluntary. After they're referred for a forensic interview or advocacy, the family and child can work with their advocate through their center as long or not as long as they would prefer. Typically, what we'll see is 6 months to a year, but also, as we know, and especially through COVID with court proceedings really being bogged down and slowed down, some of the work that we do with kids and families extend 2, 3, 4 years. Truly, specifically with our teens, when a teenage client is hooked up with an advocate and they connect, it could be years of support. And I'd like to clarify that 4,400 is new children served.
Any other questions? Seeing any, thank you, Casey, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mike Burgess. He's the Director of Policy and Outreach for Disability Rights Center of Kansas. Welcome.
All righty. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So he did a great job of introducing me already, but I'm with the Disability Rights Center of Kansas, and we're the protection and advocacy entity for the state of Kansas. We also have a Disability and Aging Crime Victims Unit, which was referenced by a previous conferee, that works and provides services to crime victims who are either aging or disability. And then we also, with our other P&A services, protection and advocacy services, we provide legally based representation across other things. So through both of those, we do a lot of work with all of the other speakers and some of the others that are going to follow me. They will do a much better job than I can of truly articulating. And I know that you have other budgets to get to too, so I will be very brief. But in a nutshell, we support the governor's rec and then the asks of the other conferees as well. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mike? All right. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. We have Caitlin Aiken, State Director of the CASA Association on WebEx. Is she on there?
I am here.
All right. Welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to come today via WebEx. I'm in the last few weeks of my third pregnancy, so I very much appreciate your kindness. And I do apologize. I have some unexpected construction going around my building today. So I will try to speak clearly and quickly so that you guys don't have to listen to that. I'm Caitlin Aiken. I'm with the Kansas CASA Association. We are the membership agency for 20 local CASA programs spread out across Kansas. And they serve to recruit, screen, train, and supervise court-appointed special advocates. You do have my written testimony that goes into depth of the need for our critical outcomes and services to the children in Kansas who find themselves in foster care. So I just want to provide to you some key information about CASA and the importance of your continued support. You'll also find in my written testimony the diversification of funding that our programs receive, and it also indicates that our programs do fundraise for about 80% of their needs as well. So wanted to make sure that you guys saw that. The Kansas CASA Network's goal is to increase the number of children that receive our specialized one-on-one best interest advocacy with the foster care system. Continued legislative support is a key function of this goal, as your support safeguards the provision of services to current and new children seeking a CASA volunteer. So your support of the 2025 governor's budget will safeguard the provision of services to an estimated 100 to 150 more children in the Kansas foster care system, needing a voice, support, and guidance from a trusted adult. It will also afford security to services currently being provided to 1,000 children by the 13 CASA programs who are going to face a critical shortfall in that federal funding from the Victims of Crime Act grant. We are also working with our federal association on that. They have a specialized committee that works with the feds and provides that advocacy at a federal level. And it's very unfortunate that we do have to come and ask for this funding here. But I appreciate the support that you guys gave last year. And I'm hopeful for that this year as well. The reason your support of the CASA mission is so important is due to the impact a CASA volunteer has on the children they serve in the foster care system. A CASA only serves 1 to 3 children. So they narrow the focus. We provide better long-term outcomes. We don't see children re-entering care. We see children graduating high school. We see them being placed in long-term, permanent, loving homes. We're a proven point of stability and access to justice for children in the foster care system. We have a 96% rate in 2022 for our court reports being submitted to court on time. CASA volunteers have a 5-year average of 98.2% for child stability with their CASA, meaning their CASA isn't changing year to year or month to month. CASA has also provided a combined 53,427 advocacy contacts to children they serve and others pertinent to that case, showing how they go about putting together that court report and their recommendations to the judge. 99% of children assigned to CASA volunteer were not re-abused while in care during 2022. And we hold that average, that 99% average for the last 5 years from 2018 to 2022. So myself and the many CASA volunteers, our local programs, we appreciate your support and we're hopeful for its continuation. I thank you so much for allowing me to speak today and I will stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Looking at your testimony, if I'm reading this right, right now you get $563,052 from the state. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, how much do you get from the VOCA grant? Where is that at in here? Or is that
So
part? Is
in
that
that-
part of that? Is that the VOCA grant is in that too?
So that was from last year. The VOCA offset was $250,368.
But is that part of that 563?
For last year, for 2024,
Right.
it was.
Right. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out how much so 200, how much?
$250,368.
Okay. All right. So you're getting about half and half, something like that, roughly.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions for Kate? All right. Yeah, Representative Seth.
Forgive my comment, but, I'm really for a tax decrease in the state of Kansas. But when I hear of a tax decrease and we don't have enough money to help these people, I wonder, what do we do? So, I'm sure I'll be told later, but again, I want a tax decrease, but I want to help these folks. So, just a thought. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, Caitlin, I appreciate you and good luck on your 3rd child.
Thank you.
All right. Committee, we do have some written testimony. Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 individuals written testimony. So I do encourage you to look through that testimony. Before we go on, though, I do want to, I just want to try to put everything in perspective try to understand, and that way, I'm sure that the advocates will be talking to us more about it in the next week. But I do understand that there was relatively level funding between 2020 and 2023. I do want to note though, even with the decrease in the VOCA grant, last year it was a $10 million increase in, or not quite 10 million, $9 million increase in funding. And then, yeah, this year is relatively level. Not saying that's the right amount. I'm just saying that last year we made a very significant investment in these grants, or in these programs. So, not saying that we shouldn't continue. I'm just wanting to make sure everybody kind of understands where that was. So, Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank everybody for all of the information that's been provided. Everything is very complete and, very helpful in the decisions that we have to make. So thank you all very much.
Yes, and I appreciate the everybody giving the information to us, and also the brevity. Last year, if you remember, we were here for a long time on this, and yes, that was the one that I misread the clock. Didn't realize how late it was, and so I do appreciate it, and we will certainly look at your concerns. So thank you for being here. Okay, I know you won't. All right. So we have Will Lawrence here, and he's going to finish us up for the governor's office. So welcome, Will. He's chief of staff for the governor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will Lawrence, Governor Kelly's chief of staff, members of the committee. I don't have any formal comments. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think there's been a lot of focus on the grants aspect of the governor's budget. And as was pointed out last year, the governor initially in the recommendations in the GBR provided, I think it was $5 or $4.5 million to hold flat or to fill the shortfall from the federal funds. And then there was the increase on top of that. That increase is in here, and that the recommendation that the governor made is to, again, fill the federal shortfall, nothing on top of that. And so, again, trying to balance, I think it's hard and unpredictable with what's going on at the federal level, which makes it difficult for us as well. And so that's where the governor made the recommendation to cover the shortfall, but leaves the rest of that for discussion. And I think for the organizations, with them coming and making the additional ask now, those aren't necessarily available to us at the time that I put the budget together. Right? The organizations will wait until the budget comes out, then they'll look at it and they'll form their testimony off of that. So some of this is information we didn't have at the time that we formed the budget either.
That's the reason why the governor didn't concur with their own budget.
Correct. So the way that always works is I put the budget together and submit it to the governor, and so I left it with the shortfall coming out, and then let her make that decision.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. I did want to item 5. I know we talked about that a little bit. The 261,914, or no, I mean, not sorry,
Mr. Chairman.
Well, it'd be number 9 or page 9, item 5. On the 2005, the other adjustments of 263,796.
Yes, I think that's the accounting for the reappropriation. Is that correct?
Yeah. We had talked about it, and you thought it was the salary increases maybe that we're going to go into.
So, yeah, what I did, Mr. Chairman, and please forgive me, this is my lawyer math. So, but I did get within, I think, $2 of Dylan's number. So I feel pretty good about that. So looking at page 14, I was trying to get to the $162,262. And that's where what I was able to come up with is, if you remember last year, I presented on some positions that we were trying to right size in our budget that had been funded through splits with agencies. That was funded at 3/4 of a fiscal year last year at $287,000. That this year for a full year goes to $382,000. So that's a difference in 95,000. And then for 1/2 fiscal year for the increase in the salary for the governor, lieutenant governor, including all of the benefits that go with those salaries, is 41. That got me to 136,000, and then the pay plan shortfall of 26,212. When you add that, I get to the 162,264 is my number. 262 is the number in the printout, and so that's where that's coming from. And then in addition to that, there has been some rollover from year to year from different savings, like less travel and stuff like that. So that's part of this as well. In that I earmarked that in the budget, which is why it shows up that way.
Any questions? Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just have you briefly look at the performance-based budget for the Office of Recovery? I understand that from talking to Dylan earlier that probably that's, a short-term kind of an office that's in there, but you have like 3 different goals that are in there, but you don't have any outputs. And so as you process through, you have several outcomes, but it's not saying that your people are doing anything to get to those outcomes. So would it be possible that you start looking at some outputs of drill into, what your goals are and how you accomplish those? So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And that does reminded me, the Office of Recovery. What do you anticipate? How much longer do you anticipate that will be needed to finish out those grant or those ARPA and all the different federal funds?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to get more information on this. I didn't put this together. Our recovery office did, so I'll circle back with them and get more information on that. As far as wrapping up the recovery office, yes, it is a temporary office. I believe all ARPA funds have to be spent by the end of 2026. And so that, there will be some time after that for all of the accounting and compliance and stuff like that. But we are winding down every opportunity we have to, move the staffing down. We're doing that so that we have the right amount of people. And most of that at this point is in a compliance and accounting and reporting phase or posture.
So you have authorized for 12 individuals. You still have 12, or is there less than that?
No, I don't know the exact number. I can get that. It's less than 12. Not all of those are funded FTEs.
That's what I figured. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Will. Appreciate it. Thanks. All right. So that finishes the governor's budget. I do appreciate everybody coming, and we will be working this particular budget in about a week, next week sometime. So, all right. Next, we have the OITS's budget, and James here to explain their budget.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is James Fisher. I'm the IT manager with the Kansas Legislative Research Department. And as the chairperson said, I'm going to present the budget for the Office of Information Technology Services. Joined with us today is Jeff Maxson, the Chief Information Technology Officer for the Executive Branch, and Brian Ryder, Director for Financial Services with OITS. As a quick reminder, OITS's primary function is to provide data and communication services to other state agencies. They serve approximately 60 agencies, 17,500 data communication users, almost 19,000 Microsoft Office 365 users, and 14,000 phone users. This budget contains on and off budget expenditures. You're going to hear that phrase a number of times. An on-budget expenditure they're primarily for statewide IT infrastructure projects, which would include substantial upgrades to the state's network and repairs to that. And in more recent years, cybersecurity initiatives. These are generally paid for with state general fund dollars, but this year you'll see some federal fund dollars lumped into that on-budget as well. The off-budget expenditures are primarily for services rendered for other state agencies. We classify these expenditures as off budget because they are accounted for in the other budgets you are all reviewing. So effectively, these agencies are paying OITS for the services that they render. So this helps avoid double counting of those funds in those instances. We're going to go ahead and jump right into the fiscal year 2024 analysis. Sure.
James, if we could just hold on for a second. I think just giving the time, and tomorrow we don't have any recommendations. We just have some budgets. I think we're going to move our recommendations to tomorrow for labor, the dental board, and optometry. So I'm sorry to make you come today, but I think that would be better because there's no way we're going to get through OITS in 15 minutes, and so it would just take a little bit longer. So we'll see you tomorrow then. All right. All right. Thank you, James. Go ahead.
No problem. A little ominous. So we're going to go ahead and jump to page 10, which has the fiscal year 2024 analysis. And in FY 2024, the agency requested $18.3 million in on-budget expenditures. $12.5 million of that is in SGF, and $5.7 million. This is a $5.7 million increase above the approved amount, and this is due to the receipt of federal funds for the American Rescue and Recovery Act plan. These funds would be used for the rehabilitation and repair of networking equipment at the end of its life cycle, additional cybersecurity initiatives, and the establishment and development of a professional licensure program. We will talk about that a bit more later on in the analysis. The off-budget request is $64.3 million, which is all those off-budget fees or services paid, which is an increase of $7.3 million or 12% above the approved amount. The revised estimate total, so both on and off budget, is $82.5 million. And I failed to point out this table looks a little different than your other budgets you've reviewed. Instead of saying SGF at the top, it says on budget, and the column next to it is on and off. So on budget is only on budget expenditures. On and off is the total between the two. If I had a third column with the difference, it would all be the off budget. And anything that's SGF in this table has a double asterisk next to the name of that line. So that's trying to kind of account for that to make it a little bit easier for y'all. Yep. So starting on page 11, we can go through these items here. So there's no changes from the 2023 approved that required legislative action aside for the receipt of the $5.7 million federal funds. Item 2 shows a $4 million increase, which is all off budget. And this is due to increased purchases of equipment, laptops, things like that for other state agencies. It's just a direct pass through essentially. Item 3 is more detail on those ARPA fundings there. So that $5.7 million breaks down to about $1.2 million federal funds for an enterprise licensing platform for several regulatory agencies to kind of modernize their methodology or the way that they would regulate their entities and account for the licensures. It also accounts for about $2.5 million for cybersecurity initiatives and $2 million for network upgrades. Item 4 shows a $2 million increase, which is all off budget. And this is for subscription software tools related to cybersecurity initiatives. And this is partially a cost increase of existing subscription and the purchase of new subscriptions as well. Item 5 is a $1.9 million increase in cost, and these are all associated with an increase in cost for the Office 365 licensures or license. 18,000 licenses adds up, it seems. Item 6 indicates, so this looks a little interesting because you have on and off budget in each item here. So items would be 6, 8, and 10 are all somewhat related. And what you're seeing here is not actual increases, but you're seeing like shifts in how the agency is funding certain items. So item 6 indicates some FTE and salary adjustments made within the Kansas Information Security Office. And it shows an SGF increase of $1.5 million. I'm sorry, it shows an increase of $1 million and $775,000 of that is from SGF. This is a shift due to the agency changing staffing resources to better meet its needs and shifting some funding sources for 6 FTEs Six FTEs were previously funded through off-budget funds, and they're now on-budget funds. There's not an FTE increase. It's just changing how their salaries are being paid. Most of that occurred in about half of that occurs in the KSO office. There's a total of 30 FTEs in that program, which is 3 above the approved amount. Item 7 shows a $1 million increase, which is all off budget, just for furniture and remodeling expenses related to the relocation of OITS to the Land and State Office Building. This was you approved this last year, but it got delayed, so you're seeing it again this year. Item 8 shows a $1 million increase. This is all SGF, and this is for purchases of software licenses for the security office for the work that they do there. Item 9 shows an increase of $365,000, which is all off budget. This is for increased rates for communication services provided by Cox Communications and AT&T to the state. Item 10 shows a decrease of $2.7 million, $1.7 million, that's SGF. And if you total 775 and 998 in the table above, that's where you get that number at as well. So that's that shift. So this is the key. So effectively moving what they're spending their SGF on. So they might have gone from contractual services of spending that amount of money, but now they're going to do something in-house with FTEs and things like that, and having the software and services available to their employees there. Item 11 shows I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong here. Yeah. Item 11 shows a $742,000 decrease in contractual services. Again, that was moving from SGF to off budget there. You'll also see sorry, here. Oh man, and then item 12 is just a decrease of $397,000. This is due to fluctuations within the budget. There's numerous little shifts that really just can't be accounted for with a nice large lump item. There's tons of tiny things going on there. So the request includes 126 FTE, which is the same as the approved amount. 15 FTE are funded with on-budget funds, which is an increase of 6 FTE above the approved amount for on-budget. 110 of those are classified as off-budget, so the remainder. So there's a decrease of 6 there. And the governor concurred with the agency's on and off-budget request, which is on page 12. Again, the total agency requests for both was $82.5 million. Would the chair like me to take questions now or go on to 2025?
Go ahead and go at 25.
Okay. $2025 is on page 14. All right. The FY 2025 on budget. Sorry, hold on a second. So the on budget request for 2025 is $18.3 million, and this is hold on one second. My notes got shifted. Apologize. Okay, here we go. The number is much too large for what I actually had down there. That's interesting. So the actual page still is page 14. If you haven't gone to there, the agency request for FY 2025 is $18.3 million in on-budget expenditures. $12.5 million is SGF, which is an all funds increase of about $3,000. $5.7 million of those funds are federal funds for the American Rescue Plan and Recovery Act. They'll receive those through FY 2026 for a total of about $17.5 million, and you'll see about $5.7 million each year. So conceivably next year you'll see that again. $60.9 million is in off-budget expenditures, which is a decrease of $3.4 million or 5.3%. Again, those are those chargebacks to agencies for the services that they receive from OITS. The total request is $79.2 million on and off budget combined. So on page 14, looking at the table, item 1 is a shift of 1.5 million SGF for an increase in cost for additional subscribers for software used to improve cybersecurity. You'll see that accounted for again in items 4 and 5 later on. Item 2 shows a $500,000 increase, all off budget, for an anticipated increase in cost associated with services offered by Cox Communications and AT&T. So they're anticipating a rate increase for those services. Item 3 shows a $2.0 million, a $2 million decrease, all off budget. This is due to a change in how the agency's desktop as a service program is being offered or is being billed. Currently, what will happen is OITS will bill the agency and the agency will pay OITS. Now with the new vendor, basically OITS facilitates the master contract, and then the vendor can get billed directly can bill the agency directly. So there's a little bit of cost savings in that now. Item 4 shows a $1.1 million decrease, all SGF, to show the absence of one-time expenditures that were in FY 2024 for software and purchases for the security office. Item 5 is another $1 million decrease, $425,000 from SGF. This is also due to the absence of one-time costs associated with a change in vendor for the mainframe as a service offering. Item 6 shows a $1 million decrease, all off budget, due to the absence of the remodeling and refurbishing to move into the Land and State Office building. Item 7 shows a $200,000 decrease, all off budget, due to there's some ongoing savings from the change in mainframe as a service vendor. They'll see that there. Item 8 shows a $81,000 decrease, $12,000 SGF, just due to fluctuations in salaries and benefits. And then item 9 is that $3,000 of little minor things that we can't account for. This includes the agency request includes 126 FTE, same as the FY 2024 revised amount. 15 are on budget again, 110 off budget. 111 are off budget. Pages 15 and 16 show the governor's recommendation, and the governor recommends an on-budget expenditure of $19.8 million. 14 million SGF, which is an SGF increase of 1.5 or 8.2% above the agency's request. Item 10 shows the reason for this 1.5 million increase, which is the recommendation to establish a 24/7 cybersecurity operations center to mitigate and respond to cyber attacks and cyber threats. Included in that would be 12 FTE for the Cyber Operations Center, and then an additional 2 FTE, one for a data privacy officer, one for a chief data officer, which are more higher level admin positions. And then for the off-budget items, the governor concurred with the agency's off-budget request for 2025. I can stand for questions now.
All right. And James, if I heard you right, 4 and 5 correspond with 1. Is that what you said?
Yes, they total up to 1.5 million. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's that kind of shifting of how things are being paid for it within the office again.
Yeah, okay. Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. James, going back to 24 then, just want to make sure I understand that right. Was there a net increase of employees or it's a wash?
There's not. It's just changing how they're funded.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. The first one is, could you give us a report? I think it wouldn't take much, but can you go back to 2018 through the current requests and give us what it's looked like as far as increase in FTEs over that period of time for this agency?
Sure. We have that in the analysis right now. Would you like to hear that now, or do you want that?
I like it on paper, so easy.
Sure. It's on page
2018. You have?
Yeah, 5 through 9. Let me see here real quick. Let me look at the exact one. So 5 through 9 shows fund trends going back to 2018, which is when this kind of got broken out from the Department of Administration. And so you'll see one for SGF expenditures and an explanation of the changes between the two of those. Then you'll see one for their other funds, which they have GIS contracting. They have 2 on and off budget. And then there is their a new one for American Rescue Plan, which does not go back to 2018, obviously, but it does go up to 2025. And then there's one for their primary fund, which is their off-budget information technology fund that you can see it's had some slight increases the last couple of years.
I wasn't finding that.
I'm sorry.
So what page?
On page 5, and you'll see the SGF trend going back to 2018. Apologize for speaking quickly.
On a time frame, that's fine.
I just do it anyways.
Well, that's general fund, but is that FTEs?
Oh, you want FTEs? I apologize. I will probably have to dig out that information for you.
Okay, and then the second question, thank you, Mr. Chair, is off of page 1. So this agency has 14,100 phones, cell phones. Is that what I'm seeing? Phone users.
That's services to other state agencies for like their desk phones. So like the Cisco desk phones in offices and state buildings, those are users. Those are the 14,000 users. So for the state government in Kansas, there's 14,000 users.
Okay, got that. So, and then so those are being supplied by, maybe I'm reading behind the lines here, but so those things and other things are being supplied by AT&T and Cox.
I believe the
What is that
phone is
relationship?
Cisco Unity. The AT&T and Cox, I can let them talk a little bit more about that in their presentation. I'm not clear if that's for stuff associated with like network backbone kind of thing that helps deliver the services to state agencies, or if it's their own like cell phone usage or communication services.
Yeah, I'd like to know that. And which brings to the thing is, then I think I would like the agency to tell me a little bit more of how they bid out those things with AT&T and that whole market, and Cox even. They're very competitive industries there of how they're being bid out, that we should be able to have some very, very good prices on that competitive bidding. So I'd like to hear about that. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none. Thank you, James. All right, Jeff, you got 1 minute. No. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and my name is Jeff Maxon. I'm the Executive Branch Chief Information Technology Officer. I will be very quick. Our mission is to provide secure, dependable, and cost-efficient enterprise technology services, obviously to executive branch of the state of Kansas, but we also do provide services to legislative and judicial branches as well in our goals. And so just answering the questions real quickly about the Cox and AT&T, sir, that is something that is for our connectivity to our various locations across the state. So that is not phone service specifically. That is our network connectivity that AT&T provides. And that is already under an existing contract that was bid out a couple of years ago. I don't know when it ends to do our next round of bids, but typically we have a contract where we have multiple awardees and that to provide service, because obviously not one vendor provides services to all parts of the state. So it does go through a competitive bid process. We're probably due for a review and reissuance of a new RFP for those as well, but we can get the exact date on when that expires.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, that's a good point, because, are we giving, 50% of it to Cox, 50% to AT&T, where all those bids are? So that'd be interesting to know when those contracts get done. My other question is off of your performance-based budgeting sheet here. And so basically, page 400, I think it is, on the big budget that came out. So you have, again, you have goals there. You have A and B goals, so I can go along with that, but you don't have any output. So maybe you could give us some output lines for your goals. And then you have outcomes, but you don't have any outputs of what your people are doing, what you're getting, that kind of thing. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Jeff, I want you, let's go to the cybersecurity monitoring, because that's really the elephant in the room. Yes. Yep. So if we could talk about that a little bit.
Yes, sir. So this is one of those asks that was on our roadmap for the next couple of years. Obviously, last year you gave us an appropriation, some resources, so we're working through that as well. So we had this in our roadmap, but with the event over at the OGA, this really kind of expedited this. So this was kind of a conversation between the security office, myself, and the governor about we need to move a little bit forward on this. So what this ask is to establish and staff a 24/7 cybersecurity operations center to help monitor and respond to incidents on our network. So our threat landscape is evolving. We're being attacked constantly around the clock, night and day. And again, we're only here for core business hours. Our bad actors' core business hours are when we're not in the office. So we need to make sure we're monitoring that. One of the other challenges we have is what we call the dwell time. So bad actors a few years ago would be in your network for months at a time before they did damage. That dwell time is shifting into days and hours that they'll be in your network before they cause significant damage. So our goal that we need is to identify things as quickly as possible and respond as quickly as possible. We can't wait to come back in the office on a morning and check our email to see what happened overnight. We need to be constantly watching that. So the ask is to staff that operations for the state of Kansas. We can expand that to other branches possibly as well, and kind of use that as a model for expanding. We have used the appropriation you've given us over the past year and some of those resources to start putting the structure in place to support this. And like I said, it was in our roadmap. We're just expediting it because of the current landscape.
Okay. I mean, as you well know, the Senate is asking you to look at alternatives through private and just to be honest, I'm getting a lot of pressure to do the same thing. So FTEs are very prime commodity these days.
Understood.
So really need to get something as quick as possible of some what other options there are out there and the pros and cons before we do this budget. I do think that that's the thing. I think we're going to have to just probably partly rely on your expertise, but also we have to weigh those pros and cons, because in talking to you, I do think that there's some advantages, but some also disadvantages. So.
Yes, sir. There are advantages and disadvantages both ways. The big thing is probably the way we can move the quickest is by bringing those resources in, as opposed to going through the RFP and contractual process. We have engaged consultants to see where this stacks up and asks. This is a relatively lean organization that we're presenting for this effort. Some of our estimates came back as you probably need at least 21 people. Some of that is we already have some of those structures in place with some of the other staff we have on hand. And so it's trying to complement what we have. We have reached out to some peer states and see some models that they're in. For example, we reached out to Iowa. They're spending about 1.6 in a very similar model. They're having a consultant provide some FTEs, but they're still using their core infrastructure to do that. But that is one place, but they're doing it with 12 FTEs at 1.6 million. So kind of in the ballpark space, and we're still talking to some other states, and they're around 18 FTEs staffed, and then maybe some vendor additional oversight as well on top of that. So there are various models we will work to see where we stack against things, but we have laid in some infrastructure to make this available, and so that's why we're trying to move forward as quickly as possible.
Any other questions? Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My limited knowledge in your field, forgive me if I am incorrect, and feel free to correct me with no hard feelings. But as I understand it, no matter how you cut this cookie, we're going to have some sort of central foundation within the government to do this. All right.
Yes, sir.
The threat's only increasing.
Yes, sir.
That's not really something that anybody's debating, I don't think. So as time progresses, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years down the road, with this ask that you're asking for, it can be supplemented and increased with contracting services, correct?
Yes, sir.
If we were to do contracting services right now, what link in the chain would be missing? How would that set you back?
Yeah. We'd still need some additional resources. That's a good question. We'd still need some additional resources to essentially act as liaisons, manage the contract, manage the connectivity on however that third party accesses either our systems, or if they're bringing in their own tooling, which would mean we would have to basically undo things we have already put in place to fit their need. And so again, that's why we have it in place from our side now. This would just be a natural progression of our own services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with this added tool in our toolbox, how will this alleviate the burden on other agencies to combat this threat?
So that is a good question, sir. Thank you for that. So our goal is to basically be while we all have accountability and responsibility as each individual agency, our goal is to, again, give them an additional assurance that their environment is being monitored 24/7. Again, we bring them into we ingest approximately 105 billion logs a month from the various agencies that get fed into our system to analyze. And so we're continuing to pull more in. So again, this is a constant watching of all those logs for anomalies, suspicious behavior, malicious behavior, responding, trying to isolate it. And if it goes to the extent of calling agencies in to respond. So it is a joint effort, but this is that group that is the first line of defense across the board.
And moving forward, so from my perspective, it's all about efficiency, and I've had some conversations earlier today about just a reminder as to everybody here in committee and listening that our transition to technology is intended to streamline and create efficiencies within an inefficient government. By creating this, we are taking these burdens off of particular individuals within other agencies, meaning we are reducing their workload, meaning at some point in the future, we can streamline these other agencies and move this burden here. Am I wrong?
No, you are correct, sir. There is obviously anything you do with technology is to create efficiencies and effectiveness. We do know there are shortages of cybersecurity professionals out there, and we're competing with private industry at the same time. And so the one way we can do that is to build economies of scale with the resources we have. And so build efficiencies through mechanisms like this is a way to do it.
And the last thing, and then I'm going to leave you alone. My 2 cents here for you, and moving forward in this debate, which I know is going to continue, it's going to be a long one. We're going to continue this conversation not only this year, but in every year moving forward until there is no more left. My advice is to plan ahead. And now that you've got this box checked and you have this idea set, plan ahead for how we're going to add those contractual services, start vetting those contractors now and start bringing that information to the table. It will only help this debate moving forward. I think I'm starting to see the chains start to link up here. And I think these contractual services will benefit not only our efforts, but the state budget moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is, where will we find these qualified people? I mean, this is a hot market right now, and are we going to be able to fill those positions if we fund them, or going a contract way? Do they already have the people in place that could just hit the ground running? Because I think we're wasting time.
Thank you for that question, ma'am. That is a great question. So we have been very fortunate that, for example, we have established an internship program where we've actually brought several interns in and have flipped them to full-time employees. We are very fortunate in Kansas that we have, I don't know the exact number, but like Fort Hays, Wichita State, K-State, KU, Johnson County are all what are deemed by DHS and the federal government as cybersecurity centers of excellence for education. And so we've got a great base to start and build partnerships with our universities to basically be a feeder system of cybersecurity professionals. And this is where these would be some of the quote unquote entry level professions to get into the cybersecurity career field. So we have a good pipeline that we can pull from. That's what we're working through. And that's where we would start initially, is to start feeding our systems of like recent graduates for these positions, or people reskilling from different career fields, people coming out of the military, et cetera.
So could it even be a combination of some of it being contracted out initially and then
yes, ma'am,
jobs created internally also?
Yeah, it could be.
Thank you.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Stephen, question that I would have, you obviously did, as you did your assessment of the side of 24-hour cybersecurity, did you look at a comparison in-house as you were making your recommendation on how to proceed? Did you look at doing contractual services versus having it all in agency?
Yes, sir. When we initially moved through, like I said, this was something that was further on our roadmap. And so we had to move a little bit quickly with the incident OJ. And this was the first thing that came before we could do all those analysis. But I will say, as we have explored things in the past, for example, on specific systems, a big one being keys, where we have had a third party monitoring the system. We're just a number in their list of people they periodically check throughout the week, and it's not dedicated to the state. So there's a give and take in that. And so we have some lessons learned from that. Again, we talk very closely with our various associations and what other states are doing to see kind of what models they have and try and replicate things that are successful. But again, this was further in our roadmap, but we're kind of at a juncture point where we had to move a lot quicker than we were anticipating.
I had a question and now it has, oh yeah. I know that a lot of the monitoring services are using AI. Is that something that you guys will be able to use also?
Yes, sir. We actually have several technologies that we've put in place that use the predecessor was called machine learning AI, and we've actually been using it for quite some time. So we have some tools that again monitor the network for what we call changes in pattern of life or pattern of behavior. And if it sees that change, it raises an alert, and that's what goes to right now our 9 to 5, essentially 8 to 5 security analysts to monitor, triage, and determine what those alerts are. So again, this just expands that capability around the clock. And so we're not waiting till first thing the next morning for things overnight.
Right. Yeah. Because I would assume AI would find them a lot faster.
Yes. Yeah. And so again, that is the complement of using technology to create efficiencies. And that's why we're leaning on the leaner model of resources, because we have tools that we've introduced that have that capability.
All right. Yes. Representative Robinson.
Thank you. I don't know how to ask you or him. Like over the weekend, I saw a news feed that said Microsoft is 19,000 of their IT people. And then I didn't get to bring it up this morning because I was late getting to the meeting. Then I also read where about a month or so ago, their top executives had been hacked by Russian whoever. And so, being that you have the kind of mind you do, where is there balance in the middle? If something like Microsoft could be interrupted, and I just wanted to thoughts out loud. It seems.
Thank you for that. That's a great question, sir. And so, for example, the Russian compromise at Microsoft was actually the Russian intelligence service that came out. And so, again, that is a nation state actor, again, a foreign military or government power going after Microsoft. Reality, we have those people going after us as well. So again, we have both criminal organizations and nation states targeting Kansas around the clock. And so our goal is to identify it as quickly as possible and stop them before they can do the damage.
All right. Any other questions about anything on the OITS's budget? Representative Turk, one last thing.
Hey, air power.
Yes. Aim high.
Not sure they may just put a strike on us or something. All right, Jeff, thank you. We'll look forward to having more conversations about that. And thank you for the job you're doing.
Thanks, sir.
And you did pretty darn good. All right, committee. We are going to, like I said, tomorrow we will have Attorney General and the governmental ethics, and then we will do the those three recommendations. Labor, dental, and optometry. So with that, have a good evening. We are adjourned.